At precisely 11:47, the great clock in Halverton Abbey stopped, and every guest at the Duke of Westhaven's wedding breakfast turned toward Georgiana as though death itself had just spoken her name. The final chime shivered through the oak-panelled hall and vanished beneath the vaulted ceiling. No one moved. Beyond the tall windows, November light lay pale across the Kent lawns. Georgiana stood beside Everard Marwood beneath the carved musicians' gallery, one hand resting near the buckle of her wedding gown. She had been Duchess of Westhaven for less than 3 hours. Already the county seemed prepared to decide whether she would remain alive long enough to see morning. At the far end of the table, Lady Octavia Kersey slowly lifted her glass. She wore grey silk and pearls that caught the light without warming beneath it. "How remarkable," she said. 11:47. Several guests lowered their eyes. Others leaned forward. Georgiana looked toward the clock. The painted moon above its dial had halted beneath a gilt cloud. The very hour the first Duchess of Westhaven died, Octavia continued. The words carried with deliberate softness. A baronet's wife drew in a breath. Somewhere near the fireplace, a man whispered, "No bride survives a night with him." The warning moved through the room like a draft under a door. Georgiana had heard versions of it throughout her 4 months of courtship. Some claimed Everard's first wife died from terror. Others said he awoke beside the fallen canopy with no memory of what he had done. 2 years earlier, Octavia herself had fled Halverton after part of the same tester descended above her. The incident had bruised her shoulder and strengthened the legend. Now she smiled at Georgiana across the wedding table. "Then perhaps we should be encouraged," Octavia said. "Her Grace understands clocks better than omens." A few guests laughed too quietly to admit courage. One elderly gentleman muttered that a rector's daughter who repaired parish timepieces might have wound herself into a duchy by the cleverest spring in England. Georgiana heard him. She also saw the satisfaction on Octavia's face. If Georgiana lived, society intended to treat survival as cunning. Octavia raised her glass higher. "To the first Westhaven bride who may see the dawn." No one drank. Everard set down his glass. The small sound of crystal touching would silence the room more completely than a shout could have done. "That is enough." He did not raise his voice. His restraint made the warning sharper. During their courtship, Georgiana had learned the difference between his calm and the stillness he used when anger threatened to become visible. Now his shoulders were motionless, and his right hand had closed once at his side. Octavia tilted her head. "I meant no cruelty." "You meant exactly what you said." Everard stepped forward so the full weight of his rank faced the table. "You were invited to honor my wife. Instead, you have made sport of a dead woman and a living one." The Earl seated nearest Octavia straightened. Everard's gaze did not leave her. "No one in this house will speak of her Grace as an experiment. No one will speculate upon her death for amusement. Lady Octavia, your carriage will be brought round." Colour rose beneath Octavia's powder. "You would dismiss me from a wedding breakfast." "I have. Surely Georgiana doesn't require, her Grace doesn't require me to recognize contempt." Octavia's mouth tightened. For one moment, Georgiana thought she might refuse and force the household to witness the humiliation of an earl's daughter. Then Octavia placed her glass upon the table and inclined her head. "As your Grace wishes." "It isn't a wish. It's the consequence of your conduct." That distinction wounded more deeply. Octavia turned, grey silk whispering over the floor. As she reached the doors, the head footman shifted aside to let her pass. His eyes followed her with an unease Georgiana noticed but did not yet understand. Conversation did not return until the doors closed behind Octavia and her companion. Even then it came in fragments, thin and artificial. Georgiana knew every gaze remained upon her, waiting to see whether she would tremble, cling to her husband, or retreat upstairs. She did none of those things. Instead, she crossed the hall toward the stopped clock. Everard followed after a brief word to Lady Sybil, his paternal aunt, who immediately drew the nearest guests into a loud discussion of parish roofing. Georgiana suspected Lady Sybil was listening to every word behind her. The clock stood taller than Georgiana, its walnut case dark with age. She opened the glazed door and studied the dial. "You don't have to do this now," Everard said quietly. "I know. We can leave the room." "I know that as well." She removed one glove finger by finger. "But if I walk away because Lady Octavia stopped a clock, every person here will remember that she commanded the moment." Everard's expression shifted. He had seen Georgiana repair clocks at the rectory and chapel. He knew her skill was not an ornament. Still, this was the first time that skill had become an act of public refusal. She opened the lower case and examined the weight lines, crutch, and pendulum. Nothing appeared broken. "Was it wound this morning?" she asked. The head footman answered from several paces away. "At 7, Your Grace." "By Mr. Pritchard." "Did anyone approach it afterward?" He hesitated. Lady Octavia stood near it before the guests entered. She said she admired the moon dial. "Did you see her touch the case?" "No, Your Grace." "Then you saw only that she was near it?" "Yes." Georgiana nodded. Opportunity was not proof. She reached behind the pendulum rod. Her fingers met cold metal where no loose object belonged. She drew out a small brass winding key, its shaft darkened with old oil. One flat side bore a stamped mark. BH39. Everard bent nearer without touching it. "Do you recognize the maker?" Georgiana asked. "Bexley and Hume." "Clockmakers?" "Mechanists. They built concealed lifts, service bells, and timed releases for country houses before the firm failed." Georgiana looked from the stamped key to the silent clock. "Did they supply this mechanism?" "No," his answer came at once. "They never supplied the hall clock." The surrounding guests had begun watching openly again. Georgiana closed her fingers around the key. Everard lowered his voice. "Come with me." He led her to the small morning room beyond the gallery, leaving the door open while Lady Sybil seated herself within sight. Only then did he speak. "You aren't obliged to use the bridal apartments tonight." Georgiana studied him. The scar beneath his collar was hidden, but she knew where it crossed his upper chest. He had told her of the wound without telling her how it had been received. "What are you offering?" "Separate rooms. A locked door. My absence, if that gives you peace." "And if I choose otherwise?" "Nothing will be expected beyond what you freely permit." There was no seduction in his voice. Only restraint so complete that it made the whispers in the great hall seem uglier. Georgiana turned the key in her palm. "Do you believe the clock stopped by accident?" "No. Do you believe Lady Octavia placed this there?" "I don't know." "Neither do I." She met his gaze. "Then we begin with what we know. Someone wanted the room to hear 11:47. Someone wanted me to hear it most." His expression hardened with concern. "You may leave Halverton before dark. I'll take you anywhere you name, and no one will call it desertion. They'd call it survival. Let them." "I won't." Georgiana slipped the key into the shallow pocket sewn inside her gown. "I married the man I observed, not the legend they repeated." Something unguarded moved across Everard's face. Hope, perhaps. Or fear made tender. "And if the legend enters our room tonight?" he asked. Georgiana glanced toward the motionless clock beyond the open door. "Then we'll see what mechanism it uses." The brass key remained in Georgiana's pocket for less than an hour. By then Lady Octavia's carriage had departed, the wedding guests had scattered into strained conversations, and Halverton Abbey had settled into the peculiar quiet of a house pretending not to have witnessed cruelty. Georgiana stood in the small morning room with Everard, Lady Sybil, Mrs. Vane, and Mr. Bell, the estate solicitor. She placed the key upon a square of cream paper rather than handing it to anyone. "Before it changes hands again, I want the time, place, and witnesses recorded." Mr. Bell adjusted his spectacles. An unusual precaution for a household object, Your Grace. It was hidden inside a clock it doesn't belong to after a public warning that I may die before dawn. I'd rather be unusual than careless. Everard's gaze rested upon her with quiet approval. Record everything she asks. Mr. Bell wrote that the brass key had been found behind the pendulum of the great hall clock at approximately noon on the day of the Duke's marriage. He described the oil on its shaft and the stamp BH39. Georgiana, Everard, Lady Sybil, and Mrs. Vane signed beneath the entry. The key was wrapped in the paper, tied with thread, and sealed with plain red wax. When Mr. Bell reached for the Marwood seal, Georgiana stopped him. Not the family crest. The key may concern this family, but the truth doesn't belong to it. Everard nodded. Use plain wax. The packet went into the solicitor's small iron box. Mr. Bell locked it and placed the box key inside his waistcoat. Only then did Georgiana agree to inspect the bridal apartments. The room occupied the eastern corner of the old wing, where November light entered through tall windows and failed to warm the dark carved furniture. Mrs. Vane unlocked the outer door and kept the key in her own hand. Lavender scented the linens. Yet the tester bed dominated everything. Its canopy hung above the mattress like an oak ceiling crowded with hunting hounds and twisting leaves. One side rested several inches lower than the other. Georgiana stopped on the threshold. Was it always uneven? Not when I entered service, Your Grace, Mrs. Vane said. And after the first Duchess died. The frame was repaired. Everard entered last. By whose order? The late steward arranged it. Mr. Quentin Marwood oversaw the work while Your Grace was recovering. Everard's face did not change, but Georgiana saw his hand close once. She crossed the room without stepping beneath the canopy and examined the bell pull beside the bed. The embroidered cord was too taut. Has this bell rung without being touched? Mrs. Vane hesitated. On cold nights, sometimes. Lady Sybil turned sharply. Why was I never told? The steward said old wire's contract. Georgiana released the cord. Old wire may contract. It doesn't usually ring with purpose. She moved to the connecting door between the bedchamber and the adjoining sitting room. A polished groove marked the underside of the bolt. Dark residue clung to the edge. She removed one glove and touched the wood beside it. Wax. Everard came nearer without crowding her. What would wax accomplish? It reduces friction. A cord could pull the bolt more easily if someone wanted the door to appear secured from within. Lady Sybil looked toward the panelled wall. From where? That is what the room has not yet told us. Everard addressed Mrs. Vane. Tell Her Grace what happened here. The housekeeper lowered her eyes. The first Duchess retired before 11. His Grace entered later. At 11:47, the servants heard a crash. The door was bolted and had to be forced. The tester had fallen. Her Grace was beneath it. His Grace lay near the bed. Everard touched the front of his coat. A carved finial struck me. I was told the wound nearly reached the lung. Do you remember the fall? Georgiana asked. No, what is the last thing you remember? She asked whether I heard a bell. I thought I did. Then she looked above me. His voice grew quieter. I stood. There was pain. After that, nothing until morning. Because the door was bolted and you remembered nothing, society decided you caused it. Society prefers a monster to a mechanism. Did you believe them? Lady Sybil closed her eyes. Everard did not turn away. For 10 years, I have believed there may be something in that missing hour I was too damaged to remember. Georgiana stepped closer. May I touch where you were injured? Surprise flickered in his face. Then he nodded. Yes. She placed 2 fingers lightly against his coat above the old scar. His breath caught. A wound doesn't confess, she said. Neither does missing memory. You make innocence sound measurable. No. I make guilt require proof. Mrs. Vane opened a drawer and removed a faded strip of ribbon. There is more. 2 years ago, when Lady Octavia stayed here during the proposed match, part of the tester descended in the night. Enough to bruise her shoulder and tear this ribbon from her nightdress. Georgiana examined it without lifting it. Was His Grace at Halverton? No. He was in London. Was Lady Octavia alone? She said she was. Was the door bolted? Yes. Everard's mouth hardened. She left before I returned. By then every drawing-room between Kent and Mayfair had heard that Halverton had tried to claim another bride. Georgiana looked up at the canopy. The first fall had killed. The second had frightened without killing. The difference felt too precise to dismiss. She drew a small silver half-hunter watch from beneath her bodice. Its enamel cover bore a crescent moon cracked through the center. She pressed the catch, and the movement began to tick in her palm. My father taught me on this watch. He repaired parish clocks because a modest living doesn't protect a church from neglect. He said metal remembers pressure, even when people choose not to. Everard's gaze moved from the cracked moon to the groove beneath the bolt. What does this room remember? That someone wanted a locked door to tell a story. She approached the bed but remained beyond the canopy's shadow. The timber gave a faint creak. A metallic sound answered from inside the wall. Lady Sybil inhaled. Everard moved between Georgiana and the bed without taking her arm. We close the room. Not yet. You heard it. So did every witness here. That makes the sound useful. I won't have you beneath that frame tonight. I didn't say I would lie beneath it. Georgiana stepped sideways until she could see his face. I will use the bridal suite. You may remain in the adjoining sitting room. The connecting door stays open. The bed remains untouched. And if I ask you to choose another room, then I'll ask whether you want my safety or my obedience. Fear crossed his face, followed by recognition. Your safety. Then help me preserve what we've seen. Mr. Bell carried the sealed evidence box back to the estate office. Mrs. Vane removed only the clothing and linen Georgiana required, then locked the outer bedchamber door and kept its key. The door was marked with plain wax so any entry would be visible. At dusk, Georgiana stood in the adjoining sitting room while Lady Sybil supervised the placement of a broad chair, blankets, and a shaded lamp. Through the open connecting doorway, the tester bed waited in shadow. Everard paused beside her. No one has ever examined that room while believing I might be innocent. I haven't declared you innocent, Georgiana said. Pain touched his expression, but she continued. I have declared that fear isn't evidence. That is more honest, and more useful. His gaze held hers. You were formidable before you became a duchess. I was formidable yesterday. A breath of amusement left him. Then, from the darkened bedchamber, something clicked above the canopy. Not loudly. Not by accident. Georgiana opened her crack moon watch. The hands had begun their slow approach toward 11:47. The metallic click sounded again from above the tester canopy, sharper than before, and Georgiana lifted her head toward the darkened bridal chamber. The connecting door remained open exactly as she had required. Beyond it, the bed stood untouched beneath its carved oak frame. The outer chamber door was locked, and the plain wax mark placed across its edge remained unbroken. Mrs. Vane still possessed the key. Mr. Bell's iron box, containing the sealed BH39 key, rested in the estate office. No one had entered the room since the afternoon inspection. Yet something above the mattress had moved. Everard crossed the sitting room before Georgiana could take a step. He stopped at the threshold without entering. Stay here. I intend to. She opened her father's silver watch and listened. Its movement ticked steadily in her palm. The fire settled in the grate. Somewhere deeper in Halverton Abbey, a door closed and the sound travelled faintly through the old walls. Nothing followed from the canopy. Everard did not relax. His shoulders remained rigid beneath his dark evening coat, and one hand closed around the edge of the doorframe. "We should summon Mr. Bell," he said. "And tell him what?" Georgiana asked. "That a sealed room made a sound. That the sound came from above the bed where my wife was expected to sleep. I am not sleeping beneath it." He looked back at her. Lamplight revealed the exhaustion around his eyes. During 4 months of courtship, Georgiana had seen him attentive, restrained, unexpectedly dry in humor, and once almost boyish when an ancient turret clock resumed striking after 40 years of silence. She had never seen fear strip him of stillness. It did not make him seem weak. It made him seem like a man standing before a door he had kept closed for too long. "Sit down," she said. "I can't." "Then stand, but stop watching that room as though it can read your thoughts." His gaze returned to the bed. "At 11:47, my first wife died beneath that canopy. And tonight no one lies there. That did not save her." Georgiana studied the watch. 11 minutes remained. "When did you last sleep through this hour?" Everard did not answer. She waited without filling the silence for him. At last he said, "Before my marriage." 10 years ago." "Yes." "And every night since?" "I'm awake before the quarter hour." His voice had flattened, as though each word had to pass through a narrow opening. "Sometimes I hear the fall before the clock strikes. Sometimes I wake certain that I have forgotten another room, another body, another night." Georgiana rose from the chair but did not approach him yet. "You remember nothing between the bell and waking injured?" "Nothing." "That absence is not proof." "It is enough for terror." The last word came rougher than the rest. His hand tightened on the doorframe. Georgiana saw the pulse beating hard at his throat. He drew one shallow breath, then another. Neither reached deeply enough. "Everard." He looked at her, but his attention seemed fixed somewhere beyond the sitting room. "I can hear the wood breaking." "The wood is not breaking now." "You can't know that." "No. But I know where we are." She stepped closer and stopped beyond his reach. "You are in the east sitting room at Halverton Abbey. The outer chamber door is locked. The wax mark is intact. The bed is empty. Lady Sybil is nearby. Mrs. Vane has the key. Mr. Bell has the brass key in his evidence box. Look at me." His gaze found hers with effort. "I don't want you near me when this happens. Because you fear you will harm me. Because I don't know what I become when the hour comes. You become awake." He flinched. Georgiana softened her voice. "May I take your pulse?" He stared at her offered hand. "You should be afraid." "That isn't an answer." His breath shuddered once. Then he extended his wrist. "Yes." Georgiana placed 2 fingers against his pulse. His skin was cold. The beat beneath it raced and stumbled beneath the force of his fear. She opened the watch in her other hand. "Listen to the ticking." "I can hear the clock in the hall." "Not that clock." "Mine." He tried. She saw the effort in the set of his jaw. "Breathe in for 4 ticks," she said. "Hold for 2. Out for 6. The first attempt failed before the 4th tick. Georgiana did not correct him. She simply began again. 1, 2, 3, 4. His chest rose. "Hold. Now release." They repeated the pattern. The pulse beneath her fingertips remained fast, but its rhythm began to steady. His attention returned to the room. "My father used this watch to regulate the parish clock," she said. "He claimed no mechanism should be bullied into keeping time." Was he speaking of clocks? Rarely. A breath escaped Everard that might have become a laugh in another hour. Georgiana withdrew her hand only when his pulse no longer felt as though it would break itself against her fingers. 6 minutes remained. Everard stepped away at once. "You should sit across the room." I will sit where I choose. Georgiana! I am not opening the sealed door. I am not climbing beneath that canopy. I am choosing a chair beside my husband. The final word changed something in his expression. She returned to the broad upholstered chair near the fire and left space beside her. Everard stood motionless for several seconds, as though accepting the invitation required more courage than refusing it. Then he sat at the edge. His body remained held in restraint, careful not to crowd her. Georgiana placed the open watch on her palm between them. For minutes remained. What did she ask you before the fall? She said. Whether I heard the bell. Did you? A faint ring behind the wall. His eyes shifted toward the chamber. Then I thought I heard the bolt move. She looked toward the canopy. I stood, and something struck me. You tried to reach her. I failed. Those are not the same statement. His mouth tightened. They were to her. The watch ticked on. Georgiana felt fear gathering in him again as the minute approached. He began to rise. She caught his sleeve. Stay. He looked down at her hand. I can't promise what memory will do. Then don't promise. Ask. His brow furrowed. Ask what? Whether you may hold me. Silence changed shape between them. It remained tense, but it belonged to the present now, not the past. Everard's voice lowered. May I put my arm around you? Yes. He moved with extraordinary care, resting one arm along the back of the chair before allowing it to settle around her shoulders. He did not pull her closer. Georgiana closed the distance herself. She leaned against him and placed her cheek over his chest. Beneath linen, waistcoat, and coat, his heartbeat sounded deeper than the watch. You are still here, she said. So are you. Then listen to both. She held the watch near his breast. The small ticking and the living beat did not agree perfectly. That comforted her. A heart was not a machine. It did not fail merely because it faltered. Everard's hand rested lightly against her upper arm. If you wish to move, tell me. I will. The warmth of him, the steady fire, and the exhaustion of the wedding day softened the edges of the room. Georgiana had intended only to close her eyes for a moment. She felt Everard's breathing change beneath her cheek. Slower. Deeper. The watch continued marking the seconds. Somewhere beyond the sitting room, Halverton held its breath. Georgiana slipped into sleep with one hand folded over the cracked moon on the watch and Everard's arm resting around her by permission. The crash came like the splitting of the house. Everard turned over her before she fully woke. His body shielded hers as carved oak struck the empty mattress and the bedframe gave a terrible groan. A splintered length of wood skidded across the carpet and stopped at the sitting room threshold. Dust rolled through the open doorway. Georgiana heard Everard's breath near her ear. His arm remained firm around her shoulders, but he released her the moment she moved. Are you hurt? He asked. No, her voice sounded distant. Are you? No, he lifted himself at once and gave her space. He did not kiss her. He did not touch her face or pull her back when she sat upright. His first act had been protection. His second was restraint. Georgiana opened the watch with trembling fingers. The hand stood at 11:47. Beyond the doorway, the great tester canopy lay across the untouched bed. The outer chamber door remained locked, and the wax mark was still whole. Everard stared into the ruined room. Someone prepared it. Before the door was sealed, Georgiana said, with a delayed release. Behind the broken bedpost, something black caught the lamplight. A narrow chain ran from the fallen canopy into a gap between the wall panels. Georgiana pointed without crossing the threshold. There. Everard followed her gaze. The fear in his face did not disappear. It became purpose. Clock chain, he said. Georgiana closed the watch around the frozen minute. And someone expected a bride to be beneath it. By 7 o'clock the next morning, Everyone at Halverton Abbey knew that the tester canopy had fallen, but no one seemed certain whether Georgiana had survived it. The rumor had travelled faster than the servants carrying hot water. When she entered the breakfast room in a dark blue morning dress, freshly changed after the dust and splinters of the night, conversation stopped so abruptly that the silver coffee urn hissed into the silence. Everard walked beside her. He did not touch her, yet his nearness formed a boundary no one appeared willing to cross. Lady Sybil rose first. Relief softened her severe face, though she had seen Georgiana less than an hour earlier and knew she was unharmed. The gesture was for the room. One by one, the remaining guests followed and stood for the Duchess of Westhaven. Lady Octavia Kersey stood among them. Her carriage had reached only a nearby inn before a rider from Halverton recalled her to answer questions about the earlier canopy incident. She wore black silk now, but no color could disguise the shock that crossed her face when Georgiana entered alive. Georgiana took her place at the table without haste. "You may sit." Chairs moved. Eyes did not. A baronet's wife stared at the faint dust still caught at Georgiana's cuff. A young clergyman looked toward Everard as though expecting some confession. Mr. Quentin Marwood, seated halfway down the table, folded his newspaper with exact care. "We heard there had been an accident," he said. "There was an attempt," Georgiana replied. Quentin's brows lifted. "That is a serious distinction." "It is also an accurate one." Everard poured coffee for her himself. Several guests watched the simple act with open surprise. "The canopy fell at 11:47, he said. "The bed was empty." Someone whispered a prayer. Quentin looked from Everard to Georgiana. "Then where did her grace sleep?" "Safely," Georgiana answered before her husband could. "Beside my husband." The words passed through the room like a change in weather. Lady Sybil concealed a small, satisfied smile behind her cup. Everard's hand paused on the coffee pot, but he allowed Georgiana's statement to stand without embellishment. Octavia's fingers tightened around her napkin. "How fortunate," she said. "Fortune had little to do with it." Georgiana spread butter across a piece of toast. "I chose not to lie beneath an unexplained structure." Quentin leaned back. "Old houses shift. Timbers fail. Iron rusts. A tragedy needn't become a conspiracy simply because the hour is dramatic." "Old timber doesn't usually attach itself to fresh clock chain," Georgiana said. The newspaper crackled under Quentin's hand. It was the first visible break in his composure. "Clock chain?" A black length running from the fallen canopy into the wall. Everard set down the coffee pot. "No further questions will be put to my wife across a breakfast table." Quentin's expression cooled. "I was expressing concern." "You were testing what she knows." The room fell silent again. Georgiana placed her knife beside the plate. "I am willing to answer questions from a magistrate, a solicitor, or a qualified surveyor. I won't perform terror for an audience." The baronet's wife flushed. The young clergyman lowered his eyes. Octavia looked toward Everard. "Surely you don't believe someone arranged this?" "I believe a chain was where no chain should have been," he said. "Until it is examined, belief is secondary." A local magistrate arrived before 10 with an independent building surveyor and 2 parish constables. Mr. Bell brought his locked iron box from the estate office and placed it upon a writing table in the east gallery. "Georgiana, Everard, Lady Sybil, Mrs. Vane, Quentin, Octavia, and the magistrate witnessed the opening." Mr. Bell displayed the wrapped packet. The plain wax seal and sign paper remained unchanged from the previous afternoon. "No one has opened this box since the packet was placed inside?" the magistrate asked. "No one," Mr. Bell said. He removed the packet and handed it directly to the magistrate, who placed it inside his own locked dispatch case without opening it. The brass key stamped BH39 had changed custody once, under witnesses, and now rested beyond the Duke's authority. They proceeded to the bridal chamber. The outer door still bore the plain wax mark placed there the previous evening. It was unbroken. Mrs. Vane produced the chamber key from her own ring and passed it to Mr. Bell in front of the magistrate. Mr. Bell opened the lock only after the surveyor recorded the condition of the seal. Inside, the room looked as though some great wooden creature had collapsed across the bed. The tester frame lay at an angle. One carved post had split. Dust coated the coverlet, and the black chain Georgiana had seen during the night ran from the fallen canopy to a narrow gap behind the wall paneling. She remained at the threshold until the surveyor declared the floor safe. Everard stood beside her, his face unreadable. "Do you wish to leave?" he asked quietly. "No, you don't have to prove courage by standing here." "I am not proving courage. I am preserving memory." The surveyor crouched beside the chain and examined it through a glass. "This is not part of the servant bell system," he said. "The links are too heavy, and the finish is wrong." He drew closer without touching it with bare fingers. "There is oil here." Georgiana saw the dark sheen along one link. "Old oil. Recent enough that dust hasn't settled over it." Quentin, who had insisted upon attending as heir presumptive, stood near the corridor door. "The east wing has been altered for generations. You may be looking at some abandoned lift or warming apparatus." "Then why does it terminate at the bridal canopy?" Georgiana asked. "We don't yet know that it does. We watched the canopy fall. The chain tightened afterward." Quentin turned to Everard. "For everyone's safety, the room should be dismantled at once. Strip the paneling. Remove the bed. Tear out whatever old machinery remains." Georgiana watched him rather than the ruined furniture. He had asked for destruction before the surveyor had finished measuring anything. "You are remarkably eager to remove the only room that may prove the Duke innocent." Quentin's mouth hardened. "I am eager to prevent another death. There has already been another attempt." "According to you?" Everard moved one step forward. "According to the fallen canopy, the sealed door, and the chain in the wall." The magistrate raised a hand before rank could overtake procedure. "Nothing will be dismantled. The chamber remains under my authority until the evidence is examined. The constables will guard the corridor." Quentin inclined his head, but resentment showed beneath the gesture. The surveyor followed the chain to the paneling and tapped the wood at measured intervals. Most sections answered with a dense, solid sound. One panel behind the bed returned a hollow note. Mrs. Vane whispered, "There is no room beyond that wall." The surveyor examined the carved molding, found a narrow depression beneath an oak leaf, and pressed it with the handle of his tool. The panel shifted inward by half an inch. Cold air breathed through the opening. Everard's face lost color. The surveyor drew the panel wider. Beyond it lay darkness, a narrow stone passage, and the glint of metal disappearing into the wall. Somewhere deep inside, a weight settled with a muted knock. Quentin stepped back before anyone else moved. The cold air from the hidden passage carried the dry smell of stone, dust, and lamp oil into the bridal chamber. No one entered at once. The magistrate ordered lanterns brought and instructed Mr. Bell to record the opening before the panel moved farther. Georgiana remained beside Everard while the surveyor measured the gap. Quentin stood near the corridor door, composed again after that single backward step. "An old priest passage, perhaps," he said. "Halverton is full of useless survivals." "A priest passage has a purpose," Georgiana replied. "So does fresh oil." When the lanterns arrived, the magistrate entered first with the surveyor. Mr. Bell followed with paper and pencil. Georgiana came next because she had found the chain and understood its gauge. Everard stayed close behind her. Lady Sybil, Mrs. Vane, Quentin, and one constable remained at the opening as witnesses. The passage was scarcely wide enough for a man's shoulders. Ancient niches had been cut into one side, but newer wooden brackets ran along the other. A compact iron housing had been fixed to the masonry directly behind the bridal chamber. Black chain entered its upper wheel. Below it, a narrow channel descended toward the floor, where a lead counterweight rested inside a timber sleeve. A wax-darkened cord ran beside the housing and disappeared through a small bore in the paneling. A thinner wire crossed near the old bell run. At the center, a square spindle projected from the iron plate. Georgiana stopped before it. This was not abandoned. Recent oil on the links had not yet gathered dust. The surveyor followed the waxed cord with his lantern. It leads toward the bedroom bolt. Georgiana pictured the polished groove beneath that bolt. Draw the cord from here, and the bolt slides inward. Then recover the cord through the bore, the surveyor said. The room appears locked from within. Everard stared at the thinner wire. My first wife asked whether I heard the bell. The surveyor lifted it carefully with a wooden rule. When the release takes strain, this would brush the old bell run. One brief ring before the weight descends. The passage seemed to contract around Everard. Georgiana saw his jaw harden, but he did not turn away. The magistrate requested the BH-39 packet. He opened his dispatch case, showed the unbroken seal to Mr. Bell, then broke it under witness. The brass key never left his gloved hand. He placed its square socket over the spindle. It fitted without resistance. A faint metallic sound passed through the housing as the pieces met. Everard looked toward Georgiana. For 10 years, his missing memory had been the only explanation society allowed him. Now metal occupied the space where guilt had lived. The discovery did not prove who had operated the device, but it proved the locked door had lied. One original key, Mr. Bell said as he wrote. Held throughout by the magistrate. The magistrate removed it, wrapped it again, and resealed the packet inside his dispatch case. Quentin gave a restrained shrug. A fitting key identifies a maker. It doesn't identify a murderer. No one has claimed otherwise, Georgiana said. Yet you answer an accusation no one has made. His gaze sharpened. The surveyor bent over the mechanism. The spindle wins the counterweight upward. A delayed release holds it. When the weight descends, this chain pulls the tester frame. The smaller cord draws the bolt and can be recovered into the passage. The warning wire disturbs the bell before the fall. Could it be timed to an exact minute, the magistrate asked. Within a narrow interval, if the release is sound. Could it lower only part of the canopy? Georgiana asked. The surveyor examined the release wheel. Yes. Engage one tooth, or interrupt the descent, and one side could fall without bringing down the full frame. Lady Sybil spoke from the entrance. As it did when Lady Octavia stayed here. Quentin's hand moved away from the wall. The surveyor lifted his lantern to the plaster around the housing. Beneath a newer white surface lay older scoring where brackets had first been sunk into the masonry. 2 upper screws were brighter than the rest, and one length of chain had a different finish. The original installation may be 10 years old or more, he said. But someone reopened this wall later and replaced part of the chain. 2 years ago? Georgiana asked. Possible. I wouldn't swear to a date from metal alone. The magistrate ordered the passage sealed after Mr. Bell completed a drawing of the housing, counterweight, chain, cord, wire, and spindle. By the following morning, a retired estate carpenter had been brought from a cottage 3 miles away. Abel Croft was 70, stooped in one shoulder, and deeply uncomfortable in the blue drawing room. He twisted his cap until Lady Sybil assured him that truth would not cost him his cottage. Everard stood near the window rather than behind the magistrate's chair. He would not let ducal rank lean over the old man's memory. Croft studied Mr. Bell's drawing. I set those wall brackets, he said. Not the wheels. A London fellow brought those. When? The magistrate asked. The autumn His Grace went north for an estate survey. 10 years or thereabouts. Everard turned. I was away 12 days. Croft nodded. Mr. Quentin said the passage was to carry a dumbwaiter safety line. Told us His Grace wanted no disturbance made of it. Quentin spoke with measured patience. You mistake me for Mr. Dawlish, the late steward. Croft shook his head. Mr. Dawlish had a red beard. You wore a green coat with black braid and paid the London fitter yourself. A coat and a payment remembered after 10 years are frail foundations. Frailer than a dead woman. Croft asked. The magistrate intervened. Did you see what the mechanism controlled? No, sir. We were dismissed before the upper chain was connected. I came back only to close the plaster. Did you ever reopen the wall? Georgiana asked. 2 years ago. Mr. Quentin called me back and said a bracket had worked loose. I opened the panel. Another man replaced the upper chain and part of the release wheel. The surveyor pointed to the brighter screws in his drawing. These? Those exactly. Quentin rose. The man confuses repairs, years, and instructions. Then your records will correct him, Georgiana said. The estate account should show who paid for the work. If records survive every trivial alteration in an ancient house. You wanted the room destroyed yesterday. Now you hope its records vanished. Everard's voice stopped Quentin's reply. You will remain available to the magistrate. Quentin looked at his cousin. You take a carpenter's failing memory over your own blood. I took blood over inquiry once, Everard said. A woman died under the result. Quentin left under the constable's observation. Croft signed his statement with a shaking hand. The magistrate dismissed him only after Everard promised that neither cottage nor pension would be touched. When the others withdrew to search the accounts, Everard remained beside the table. His open hand rested against the chair back, unsteady despite the stillness of the rest of him. The door was bolted, he said. I had no memory. Everyone told me the simplest answer was that grief had made me dangerous. I accepted it because accusing my own house seemed impossible. You accepted silence, Georgiana said. Yes. That is not the same as murder. It preserved the machinery. Georgiana placed her hand in his. He looked down, surprised. She did not withdraw. After a moment, his fingers closed around hers with careful strength. You have given her back a question, he said. Your first wife. A question worth answering. Not what was wrong with her. Not what monster I became. Who built the thing above her bed, and why? Mr. Bell returned carrying a fresh rubbing from the inner plate of the housing. Under soot and oil, the stamped words stood clear. Bexley and Hume. Beneath them were a place and a year. Clerkenwell. 1839, the physician's ledger reduced Lady Octavia's celebrated survival to 3 lines of ink. Georgiana stood beside the magistrate in the blue drawing-room while November rain whispered against the windows and Mr. Bell read the entry aloud. Shallow contusion to the upper shoulder. No broken skin. Full movement retained. Patient declined further examination. Across the room, Octavia sat very straight in black silk, one gloved hand resting upon the other. Quentin stood behind her chair, not close enough to suggest intimacy, but near enough to appear protective. Everard remained by the mantel. The BH39 key was still locked inside the magistrate's dispatch case. The hidden passage and its mechanism had been sealed after the surveyor completed his measurements. Nothing from the room had been brought into the drawing-room except Mr. Bell's drawings, the rubbing marked Bexley and Hume, Clerkenwell, 1839, and the physician's household ledger. You call that a minor injury because you did not endure it, Octavia said. Her voice was composed, but the fingers of her right hand tightened over the left. I woke beneath a falling canopy in a room where another woman had died. Fear may be severe even when injury is not, Georgiana replied. The ledger concerns the injury. Octavia turned her gaze upon her. You are remarkably calm for a woman who nearly shared my fate. I did not lie beneath the frame. Because you knew not to. The accusation entered softly. Everard moved, but Georgiana lifted one hand before he could speak. I knew the room contained unexplained damage. That is not the same as knowing who caused it. The magistrate asked Mrs. Vane to bring in the former chambermaid who had attended Octavia 2 years earlier. The young woman had since married a tenant farmer and now entered Halverton as Mrs. Nash, wearing a plain brown bonnet damp from the journey. She looked first at Octavia, then at the floor. You won't lose your husband's tenancy for speaking truthfully, Everard said. Mrs. Nash glanced toward him. Not even if the truth displeases the family. Especially then. The answer steadied her. The magistrate asked what she had seen on the night of Octavia's accident. We heard a cry and a heavy sound, Mrs. Nash said. When Mrs. Vane opened the door, Lady Octavia was standing by the fireplace. She had already put on her wrapper and slippers. Was the canopy resting upon the bed? One side had lowered. Not to the mattress. It hung above it. Was Lady Octavia trapped? No, sir. Octavia's face cooled. I freed myself. Mrs. Nash looked distressed. There was nothing over your ladyship when we entered. Did she permit the physician to examine her at once? Georgiana asked. Mrs. Nash shook her head. Lady Octavia said she would see no physician until she had spoken with Mr. Quentin Marwood. The room became very still. Quentin's expression did not alter. She was frightened. I was the nearest gentleman familiar with the house. How long were you alone? The magistrate asked. Perhaps a quarter hour, Mrs. Nash said. I waited outside with the physician. Octavia rose. This is intolerable. A servant's imperfect memory is being used to turn my terror into deceit. Sit down, the magistrate said. His tone was not loud. It allowed no argument. Octavia remained standing for one breath, then resumed her chair. The independent surveyor placed his drawing of the release wheel on the table. The partial descent described by Mrs. Nash could not have stopped at that point through ordinary failure. A fully released counterweight would have continued downward. One tooth might be engaged to lower only a portion of the frame, or the descent could be interrupted from the passage. Georgiana looked at Octavia's uninjured shoulder. A fall arranged to frighten without killing. Octavia's eyes flashed. You accuse me because I lived. No. I question why the mechanism behaved differently for you. Quentin stepped forward. Or perhaps the mechanism did not behave at all. The frame may have shifted, and Her Grace now interprets every old noise through her own mechanical education. The surveyor has identified replacement chain and a worked release wheel, Everard said. That is not interpretation. Quentin inclined his head. Then expertise becomes relevant. Her Grace understands fusee chain. She has purchased it. She has repaired clocks. She knew where to look after the fall. Georgiana felt the attack take shape before the room fully understood it. Many men in Kent understand chain, she said. You have not questioned them. None married a duke under a curse and survived the precise night society expected her to die. Perhaps because none were asked to sleep beneath a damaged canopy. Octavia gave a brittle laugh. How convenient that your knowledge saved you. Georgiana met her gaze. Knowledge often appears convenient to those who expected ignorance. The magistrate ended the examination before the exchange became performance. Mrs. Nash signed her statement. The physician's entry was copied. The surveyor added a note that the controlled stopping point was mechanically possible but did not by itself identify the operator. That distinction mattered to Georgiana. Suspicion was not proof, even when suspicion pointed where she wished. Octavia and Quentin were dismissed only after the magistrate reminded them that neither might leave Halverton without notice. When the others withdrew, Everard remained in the drawing-room with Georgiana. The rain had darkened the lawns beyond the windows, and the fire burned low. He stood before Mr. Bell's copy of the estate plan, which showed a solid wall where the passage had been found. After Octavia's incident, I ordered the tester bed removed, he said. Georgiana waited. Quentin persuaded me not to proceed. He said dismantling the room would confirm every rumor. He said an inquiry would invite the county to examine my first marriage, my missing memory, and every servant who had ever left this house. And you listened? Yes. Because you trusted him. Everard looked at the blank section of the plan. Because he offered silence when I was afraid of certainty. Georgiana moved nearer, but she did not touch him. What certainty? That the room might prove I had done something I could not remember. The room has now proved someone built a mechanism. 10 years too late. The words carried no request for comfort. My silence left it there. When Octavia was injured, I could have opened the walls. I chose the family name instead. You chose fear. The result is the same. Georgiana thought of the first Duchess beneath the falling oak, of Everard waking wounded beside her, and of a house that had preferred a curse because curses did not require powerful men to answer questions. No, she said. The result must be answered. That does not make every cause identical. Everard turned toward her. You are still trying to distinguish me from the harm. I am distinguishing responsibility from invention. You did not build the device. You did preserve the silence around it. His face tightened, but he accepted the words. What would accountability require? That you stop protecting the house from the truth. Even if the truth destroys what remains of it. A house that survives by feeding women to a legend deserves to lose more than wallpaper. A faint, pained smile touched his mouth. Then it vanished. He lifted one hand and stopped before reaching her face. May I? Georgiana understood the question. Yes. His fingertips rested against her cheek with extraordinary care. The touch was warmer than she expected. He did not draw her closer. He waited. Georgiana chose to lean into his palm. For one quiet moment, the distance between them softened without disappearing. I don't know what forgiveness should look like, he said. Then don't ask for it before you have finished telling the truth. I won't. There was no kiss. The restraint mattered more than one would have. A knock interrupted them. Everard lowered his hand before Mr. Bell entered carrying a folded note. This came from the clock supplier in the market town, the solicitor said. The man thought the request unusual enough to report. Georgiana took the paper. Quentin Marwood had asked the supplier for copies of every receipt issued to Georgiana Blythe during the previous year. He had requested records of fusee chain, winding tools, replacement springs, clock oil, and brass keys. The request had been made before Octavia's examination began. Georgiana read the final line twice. Quentin had not waited for evidence to point toward her. He had gone searching for something he could make resemble guilt. Quentin placed the leather folio upon the inquiry table before anyone had asked him to speak, and Georgiana knew at once that he had found the weapon he wanted. By 11 o'clock, the East Gallery had filled with neighboring landowners, 2 clergymen, the local magistrate, the independent surveyor, Mr. Bell, Lady Sybil, Mrs. Vane, and enough household heads to ensure that no later account could be dismissed as private family invention. The bridal chamber and hidden passage remained sealed under the magistrate's authority. The BH-39 key rested inside his locked dispatch case. Georgiana stood beside the copied mechanical drawing while Everard remained several paces behind her, close enough to support her and far enough to make clear that she would speak for herself. Lady Octavia sat near the windows in black silk, pale and composed. Quentin stood beside the mantel with one hand resting on the folio. He had not opened it. That restraint made the object more threatening than any display could have done. The surveyor began with the facts already established. A black chain connected the hidden housing to the fallen tester. A waxed cord could draw the bedroom bolt. A delayed release could lower the frame at a chosen hour. He did not repeat the full workings of the mechanism. Instead, he explained only what the witnesses needed to understand. The fall was prepared, he said. It wasn't an ordinary timber failure. A landowner near the gallery doors frowned. Could a woman with experience in clocks prepare it? Every face turned toward Georgiana before the surveyor answered. A person with mechanical knowledge might understand it. That doesn't prove access, ownership, or action. Quentin opened the folio. Then perhaps access begins with purchase. He removed a folded receipt and held it by the edges. This original account was supplied by a clock dealer in the neighboring market town. It bears the name Georgiana Blythe. The magistrate accepted the document. Georgiana felt the cold before she knew why. It began in her fingers and moved slowly into her wrists. The magistrate read the entry aloud. 2 months before the wedding, Georgiana Blythe had purchased a length of black fusee chain, clock oil, and 2 replacement springs. The stated gauge matched the newer section found inside the wall at Halverton. A murmur spread through the gallery. Georgiana heard the words clockmender and fortune hunter whispered from opposite sides of the room. The insult reached farther than society intended. Her father had taught her to repair clocks because the parish could not afford neglect. He had placed tools in her hands without shame. Now men who could not identify a wheel from a spring were using that inheritance as proof that she had built a murder. Lady Octavia rose with careful slowness. So Her Grace purchased the very kind of chain found above the bridal bed. The same gauge, Georgiana said. Not necessarily the same chain. A distinction convenient to someone who understands mechanisms. Octavia's voice remained soft. You knew the legend before you married. You knew the Duke's fear. You knew society expected danger. Everard's posture changed, but he did not interrupt. Georgiana was grateful for that. Octavia continued. A rector's daughter enters a cursed house, arranges a fall, survives it, and becomes the only woman brave enough to stand beside a ruined duke. It is almost elegant. The humiliation settled more heavily because several people in the gallery found it believable. Georgiana saw it in the averted eyes, in the slight turn of one clergyman's shoulder, in the baronet's wife who had whispered at breakfast and now watched her with open suspicion. Quentin spoke before the magistrate could stop the exchange. No one is declaring guilt. The receipt demands inquiry. Then let us inquire, Georgiana said. Her voice sounded calm even though the edge of the table felt cold beneath her hand. The receipt is mine. Surprise passed through the room. Octavia's expression sharpened. Georgiana faced the magistrate. I purchased the chain for the parish clock in my father's former living. The clock had lost time for nearly 6 months. The churchwardens could not afford a London repairer. Can you prove the chain was installed there? The magistrate asked. Not from this room. How unfortunate, Octavia said. Georgiana looked directly at her. Only temporarily. Quentin folded his hands behind him. The parish is some distance away. Records may be altered. Chain may be removed before anyone arrives. Just as old passages may be called dumbwaiters and deliberate falls may be called accidents. Georgiana asked. His eyes hardened. You turn every question into accusation. No. I turn hidden interest into visible motive. The magistrate lifted one hand. Her Grace will answer without interruption. Georgiana continued. The parish clock bears a repair plate dated after my purchase. The churchwarden accounts record the chain, its length, and my unpaid labor. The chain itself can be measured where it hangs. I will travel there under witnesses. One of the clergymen asked, why was the labor unpaid? Because the parish had already paid for materials, and because my father served there for 23 years. Her answer silenced him. Georgiana looked around the gallery. I won't apologize for understanding a mechanism. I won't pretend ignorance because skill appears inconvenient in a woman. The receipt proves that I bought chain. It does not prove I entered a hidden passage, wound a counterweight, drew a bolt, or attempted to kill myself beneath a canopy. The elderly gentleman who had mocked her at the wedding breakfast lowered his eyes. Everard stepped forward only then. The receipt is evidence of purchase, not guilt. His voice carried the full authority of his title, but he did not direct the magistrate's conclusion. My wife will be allowed to verify her account under proper witness. No person in this house will punish her for possessing the knowledge that saved her life. Quentin inclined his head. Your confidence is touching. It is not confidence, Everard said. It is discipline. The magistrate examined the receipt and passed it to Mr. Bell for recording. The original was placed in a fresh envelope, sealed, and returned to the magistrate's custody. The parish claim will be verified, he said. Until then, neither the receipt nor Her Grace's account will be treated as final proof. The surveyor cleared his throat. There is another concern. The tester structure remains unstable. Even after the main fall, the surviving frame may shift. I cannot recommend continued access. Quentin looked toward the sealed corridor. Then dismantle it before another person is injured. Georgiana answered before Everard could. Not until every surface, bracket, line, and passage has been recorded. You would preserve timber above human life? Quentin asked. I would preserve the truth that may protect more than one life. The magistrate ordered the room closed and guarded. No dismantling would occur until the parish evidence had been examined and the hidden route fully mapped. Quentin's expression gave nothing away, but Georgiana saw disappointment in the stillness around his mouth. The inquiry ended without vindication. That was the hardest kind of ending because suspicion remained alive. Guests withdrew in small groups, speaking too quietly to be challenged and loudly enough to be heard. Georgiana stayed beside the empty evidence table until only Lady Sybil, Mr. Bell, and Everard remained. Everard approached and opened his hand between them. A week earlier she might have mistaken the gesture for rescue. Now she understood it as an invitation. She placed her hand in his. I believe you, he said. Belief won't be enough. I know. His fingers closed gently. Tell me what will be. Time. Distance. Witnesses. The parish clock. You'll have all of them. Georgiana looked toward the sealed east wing. And the room must remain untouched. Everard followed her gaze. It will. Yet that evening, as November darkness gathered over Halverton, Georgiana passed the estate office and heard the scratch of a pen through the half-open door. Everard sat alone at the desk. Before him lay an order addressed to the head carpenter. She read the first line before he covered it with his hand. At dawn, the bridal chamber was to be dismantled. Georgiana did not enter the estate office at once. She stood beyond the half-open door long enough to see Everard's hand remain over the page, as though the pressure of his palm could erase the first line she had already read. A lamp burned beside him. The rest of the room lay in shadow, lined with maps, ledgers, and the orderly instruments of ducal authority. On the desk waited an instruction to the head carpenter. At dawn, the bridal chamber was to be dismantled. You told me the room would remain untouched, she said. Everard looked up. He did not pretend ignorance. I told you what I believed I could permit. Permit. The word settled between them with more force than anger. Georgiana stepped inside and pushed the door only until it rested against the frame. She would not give privacy the appearance of secrecy. Has that order been sent? Everard held her gaze. Yes. The answer hurt more because it was immediate. A messenger left before you came in. Then you did not merely consider breaking your word. You used your power to do it before I could object. He rose from the desk. Exhaustion had hollowed the skin beneath his eyes, but fear, not fatigue, drove him now. The surveyor called the structure unstable. The frame has already fallen once. If another section shifts while you are near it, then I remain outside until it is secured under the magistrate's direction. You cannot guarantee that. Neither can you guarantee the truth after the walls are torn apart. His jaw tightened. Truth is worthless if you are dead. Do not use my life to excuse taking my judgment from me. The word stopped him. For an instant he looked less like a duke than a man who had heard an old failure return in a new voice. Then fear hardened again. I have already lost one wife in that room. And because you feared what the room might reveal, you accepted silence for 10 years. Georgiana's voice remained level, though pain pressed against her ribs. Now you would destroy the place where the lie was built because you fear what may happen to me. The reason has changed. The method has not. That is not fair. No. It is accurate. Everard came around the desk but stopped several feet away. He did not reach for her. I cannot endure another night knowing that mechanism remains above you. I am not asking to sleep beneath it. You spoke of returning once the inquiry was complete. When it is safe. It may never be safe. Then we decide that after the evidence is preserved, not before. He looked toward the order. You speak as though timber and iron matter more than your life. My life includes my name. My reason. My right to choose what risk I accept. Georgiana drew the silver half-hunter watch from her waist and held it between her fingers. The cracked enamel moon caught the lamplight. If you dismantle that room now, Quentin will say you destroyed proof because I was guilty. Octavia will say I survived by arranging the fall myself. The first Duchess's family will be left with another silence. And I will become a protected woman whose husband saved her by making the truth impossible. I would rather be hated by the county than bury you. That is not devotion, Everard. That is fear asking to be praised as love. He flinched. She wished the words did not need to wound him. She wished, more dangerously, that his terror did not move her. But tenderness could not be allowed to turn surrender into virtue. You told me in the morning room that nothing would be expected beyond what I freely permitted, she continued. Did that promise apply only to your hands? Or does it apply to your power? His gaze dropped. The room grew quiet enough for the watch to be heard. Tick. 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 Everard returned to the desk. Georgiana thought he meant to sign another instruction. Instead, he lifted a fresh sheet of paper. The first messenger may have reached the carpenter already. Then send another. I will. He began writing. A countermand. Immediate. No work is to begin. No one is to approach the seals. And if the carpenter has already left his workshop, then we stop him when he arrives. Before he crosses the east corridor. Before he touches a door. He signed the countermand, rang for a footman, and ordered the fastest rider sent after the first messenger. The footman took the folded paper and left at once. Everard remained standing behind the desk. It will not be carried out. Relief came, but Georgiana did not mistake correction for completion. Tomorrow you will say before witnesses that the demolition order was yours and that I stopped it. His face tightened. You do not trust my word. I trusted it this afternoon. He accepted the blow without defense. What else? Transfer every key to the east wing, every right of entry, and every decision concerning the chamber to the magistrate until he releases it. Put the transfer in writing. That will make my judgment a matter of public record. Yes. He looked at her for a long moment. And us? Georgiana felt the question before she understood its shape. I will stay in Lady Sybil's suite until you decide whether you married a partner or acquired a dependent. Pain crossed his face. He did not ask her to remain. He did not offer rank, protection, or apology as a bargain. I will have your belongings moved before midnight. My personal things only. Nothing from the sealed rooms. Of course. She turned to leave. Georgiana. She stopped but did not look back. I was wrong. The words were quiet and without excuse. Yes, she said. You were. Before dawn, wheels sounded in the forecourt. The countermand had not reached the head carpenter in time. He arrived with 2 workmen and a chest of tools, having left his cottage before the second rider found him on the road. Georgiana met them at the foot of the east staircase. Lady Sybil stood beside her in a dark wool wrapper, and 1 parish constable guarded the corridor above. No one goes farther, Georgiana said. The carpenter removed his cap. His Grace ordered the room taken down. His Grace revoked that order. Footsteps crossed the hall behind her. Everard approached without haste, carrying the written countermand in one hand. Her Grace is correct, he said. The order was mine. It is withdrawn. You will not touch the chamber, the passage, the panelling, or the seals. The carpenter looked relieved rather than offended. Yes, Your Grace. By 9 o'clock, the magistrate had assembled the necessary witnesses in the east gallery. The wax marks on the bridal chamber and hidden passage panel remained whole. The constables confirmed that no person had entered during the night. Everard faced the magistrate, Lady Sybil, Mr. Bell, Mrs. Vane, the surveyor, the household heads, Quentin, and Octavia. Georgiana stood beside Lady Sybil, not beside her husband. "Last night I sent an instruction to dismantle the bridal chamber," Everard said. No murmur followed, but several faces changed. "I did so without the magistrate's authority and before the inquiry was complete. Her Grace discovered the order and required that I revoke it. The head carpenter arrived before the countermand reached him. No part of the room was disturbed." Mr. Bell read the written statement aloud. It named Everard's instruction, Georgiana's intervention, the intact seals, and the workman's arrival before any work began. Everard signed first. Georgiana signed only as witness to the facts. Lady Sybil, Mrs. Vane, the carpenter, and both constables signed after her. Everard then surrendered the east wing keys to the magistrate and transferred all authority over the chamber, the known passage, and any related access points until formal release. Quentin's expression revealed nothing. "A prudent correction," he said. Everard did not answer him. Under the magistrate's authority, the surveyor opened the main passage panel and entered with one constable. The chain remained fixed. The counterweight remained in its channel. The housing had not been removed. Then the surveyor called for a lamp. Georgiana heard the change in his voice. The magistrate went inside. Everard stayed exactly where he had been told to stand. When the surveyor emerged, he carried nothing. "The housing is intact," he said. "The chain has not been cut. The counterweight has not shifted." "Then what is wrong?" Georgiana asked. The surveyor looked toward the sealed bedroom door, then back at the passage. "The square winding spindle is gone." Everard's gaze moved to the unbroken wax. "No one entered through this panel." "Nor through the chamber," the magistrate said. Georgiana closed her hand around the cracked moon watch. Someone had reached the mechanism without disturbing either known entrance. Somewhere inside Halverton Abbey, there was another way into the wall. The missing spindle changed the shape of the inquiry before anyone had finished speaking. Until that morning, the sealed chamber and guarded passage had suggested that the mechanism was finally secure. Now they proved only that someone understood Halverton better than the people protecting it. The magistrate ordered both known entrances examined again. The wax on the bridal chamber door remained whole. The seal across the main passage panel showed no fracture. The constables confirmed that neither guard had left his post. "Then the spindle did not pass through either entrance," Mr. Bell said. "Or the person who removed it did not need either entrance," Georgiana replied. The surveyor returned to the narrow passage with a lantern and measured the masonry behind the empty housing. He tapped each section slowly, then stopped where the stone turned toward the linen closet. "There is a recess behind this timber sleeve," he said. "I missed it because the housing concealed the angle." The magistrate entered behind him. Everard remained outside the panel, honoring the authority he had surrendered. Georgiana stood beside Lady Sybil and listened to boots scrape over stone. A few minutes later, the surveyor emerged with dust on one shoulder. The recess bends away from the known corridor. It may reach another room. Lady Sybil looked toward the wall. "My sitting room lies beyond that side of the passage." Georgiana felt Everard's attention shift to her. She had moved into Lady Sybil's suite only the previous night, bringing her personal clothing, her father's watch, and nothing from the sealed east rooms. "Then we inspect it," Lady Sybil said. The magistrate would not permit a general search without cause, but the missing spindle supplied enough reason to examine the shared wall. They crossed to Lady Sybil's sitting room with the surveyor, Mr. Bell, Mrs. Vane, and one constable. Georgiana had left her silver half-hunter watch on the dressing table less than half an hour earlier while changing the ribbon at her collar. The fine chain still lay there, coiled beside the pincushion. The watch did not. Georgiana stopped before the empty clasp. One hook had been bent outward. "It was here." Lady Sybil came beside her. "I saw it when you entered after breakfast. You placed it beside the mirror." Everard stood at the doorway rather than entering without invitation. He did not ask whether Georgiana might have moved it. He did not glance toward her reticule or pockets. "Who has been in this room?" he asked. Lady Sybil's maid went pale. "Only her ladyship, her grace, and myself." She hesitated. Lady Octavia came to the sitting room while her grace was changing in the adjoining chamber. Georgiana turned. "Why?" She said she had left a shawl here when she visited Lady Sybil yesterday. I offered to fetch it, but she said she knew where it was. "Were you present?" the magistrate asked. "At first. Then Mrs. Vane called me to the corridor for the linen list. Lady Octavia was alone for perhaps 3 minutes. Did you see her touch the dressing table?" "No, sir." The answer disappointed the room because it was honest. Georgiana preferred it for the same reason. Opportunity was not proof. The surveyor moved a tall mahogany press away from the shared wall. Behind it, one narrow panel bore fresh scratches near the floor. He pressed along the molding until a concealed catch released. The panel opened inward upon a cramped service recess. Beyond it, darkness turned sharply toward the linen closet and then toward the hidden passage. "The visible closet door need never be opened," Georgiana said. "Someone could enter here, pass behind the shelves, and reach the mechanism without disturbing either seal." The magistrate sent the constable into the recess with a lantern. A minute later, the man called out, "There is something beside the housing." Georgiana knew before he named it. She felt the absence at her waist, the empty chain upon the dressing table, and the memory of her father's thumb winding the watch at the rectory table. The constable did not touch the object. Mr. Bell entered to sketch its position. When he returned, his face was grave. The silver watch lies beside the empty spindle socket. Octavia arrived before the watch was removed. Whether she had been summoned or had learned of the discovery from a servant, Georgiana could not tell. She stood in Lady Sybil's doorway and looked at the bent chain upon the table. "How dreadful," she said. "Her Grace's own watch inside the passage." The magistrate turned toward her. "It has not yet been brought out." Octavia's expression held for one fraction too long. The constable announced where it was. Georgiana met her gaze. "Then you heard the location, not the meaning." "The meaning seems plain." "Only to someone in a hurry." The watch was lifted with a clean cloth after Mr. Bell completed his drawing. Its silver case still bore the cracked enamel moon. The clasp had been twisted, and the movement ticked unevenly, but it had not stopped. Georgiana heard the faint irregular sound and felt something inside her tighten. Her father had taught her to listen for a damaged movement before opening a case. He had called the watch stubborn because it kept time after every fall from his workbench. Now someone had taken the last object that still carried the rhythm of his hands and placed it beside a murder device to make her look false. For a moment she wanted to snatch it back. She did not. "Record the damage," she said. "Bent clasp. Irregular movement. Crack unchanged." Mr. Bell wrote each detail. The magistrate wrapped the watch, labeled the packet, and sealed it inside his dispatch case beside the BH39 key and the fusee chain receipt. Georgiana watched the case close. She would not touch the watch again until the law released it. Octavia folded her hands. A cherished object is persuasive when one arranges for it to be found. "So is private access to the room from which it was stolen," Georgiana replied. Color rose beneath Octavia's powder. "You accuse me without a witness." "No. I state that you had opportunity. I will not call opportunity proof merely because the conclusion pleases me." The distinction struck harder than accusation. Octavia left without answering. When the magistrate had sealed the secondary access and dismissed the servants, Georgiana remained in Lady Sybil's sitting room with Everard. The empty chain lay on the dressing table. He did not offer comfort she had not requested. "I believe you," he said. Georgiana looked at him. "The evidence is unfavorable." "The evidence is incomplete." The answer came without hesitation. A week earlier he might have asked her to surrender the chain, leave the room, or let him decide what happened next. Now he waited. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "Find Bexley and Hume." "Clerkenwell?" "Yes. The maker's order book may name the purchaser." "I will go with you." Georgiana shook her head. "You must remain here." Fear moved across his face, followed by restraint. "Because of Quentin." "Because he knows the estate, the servants, and every corridor. You have removed him from authority, but influence does not require keys. If we both leave, he will control the house through habit. Lady Sybil will accompany you. And a married maid. We will stay with her widowed relation in Bloomsbury. You have planned this." "I began when the stamp said Clerkenwell." Everard looked toward the empty chain. "May I?" Georgiana gave it to him. He straightened the bent hook with the edge of a small dressing knife, then fastened the chain at her waist after she nodded. The missing weight of the watch felt more intimate than its presence ever had. His fingers left the clasp at once. "I will keep the room standing," he said. "And I will keep Quentin from every account, key, and instruction. That is what I need." A knock sounded. Mr. Bell entered carrying a note delivered from London by the Morning Post. The successor to Bexley and Hume had answered an earlier inquiry from the magistrate. Several old order books survived, but a paper broker was coming to purchase the unwanted volumes in 2 days. Georgiana read the final line once. "We leave before dawn." Everard's gaze held hers. He did not say no. "Then return with the name," he said. "I intend to return with proof." Georgiana left Halverton before sunrise with Lady Sybil, a married maid, and 2 footmen, while Everard remained beneath the same roof as Quentin Marwood and the sealed East Wing. The decision sat uneasily between them, but neither tried to reopen it. At the front steps, Everard checked the post-chaise, spoke with the driver, and then stopped himself before issuing another instruction. "The magistrate still has the watch, the BH key, and the receipt," Georgiana said. The empty silver chain rested against her travelling dress. "Nothing essential leaves Halverton with me." "You do," Everard replied. Fear moved beneath the restraint of his voice, but he did not ask her to stay. "And I am returning by my own judgment." "I know." He handed Lady Sybil a folded list of London solicitors. "Choose whichever man Georgiana trusts. Not whichever man is impressed by my name." Lady Sybil accepted the paper. An unusually sensible instruction from a duke before dawn. Everard almost smiled. Then he looked at Georgiana. "Bring back what the records can prove. Don't risk yourself for what they cannot. I will not confuse courage with carelessness." He inclined his head, accepting the promise exactly as given. The carriage carried them through the dark Kent lanes to the station. From there, the railway bore them toward London Bridge beneath a sky heavy with coal smoke. The compartment smelled of damp wool, leather, and soot. Lady Sybil read for most of the journey, allowing Georgiana to think without demanding reassurance. Only when the train crossed the Thames did she close the book. "You are not obliged to forgive Everard because he corrected himself." Georgiana watched London gather beyond the glass. "I know. You are also not obliged to remain angry merely because anger proves you have standards." "I know that as well." Lady Sybil's mouth softened. "Good. I dislike wasting excellent advice." By early afternoon, they reached Clerkenwell. Narrow streets pressed around workshops whose windows displayed brass wheels, pendulums, enamel dials, and instruments too specialized for casual buyers. The address stamped inside the Halverton housing no longer belonged to Bexley and Hume. A printer occupied the front room. The rear workshop had passed to a younger mechanist named Caleb Frost, who listened to Georgiana's explanation without visible awe at her title. "Bexley died 5 years ago," he said. "Hume went blind before that. I bought the tools, unfinished work, and whatever ledgers the nephew hadn't sold." "Do the 1839 orders survive?" Georgiana asked. "Perhaps. A paper broker is coming tomorrow morning for the older volumes. Frost pointed toward 3 corded crates stacked beside the wall. Those have already been marked for sale. Georgiana felt the deadline tighten around her. Then we open them today. Frost shook his head. They are my property, Your Grace. I won't have pages removed because a noble household has discovered an embarrassment. Nor should you. She took Everard's list from Lady Sybil and selected a solicitor whose office stood within walking distance. The original volume remains with you. A solicitor witnesses the search. Any relevant page is copied and certified. You sign only what you know. Frost studied her, then nodded. That I can permit. The solicitor arrived within the hour. Under his observation, the cords were cut and the crates opened. The first held invoices from the 1820s. The second contained repair accounts and private household bells. The third appeared to begin in 1841. Georgiana felt hope slipping until she noticed that one volume had been shelved backward, its spine hidden beneath a bundle of discarded pattern sheets. The leather cover bore the year 1839 in faded gilt. The book had no index. They turned each page slowly, recording the order in which the entries appeared. Near the middle, between a dumbwaiter brake and a chapel bell regulator, Georgiana found a line written in dark brown ink. Delayed counterweight release. Halverton Abbey, Kent. Beneath it stood the purchaser's name in a confident hand. Quentin Marwood. The entry listed payment, correspondence address, and a private instruction that installation occur while the Duke was absent. A final notation stated that the upper connection would be completed after household workmen were dismissed. Georgiana read the passage twice. She felt no triumph. Only the weight of a door opening where another woman had died. The signature is clear, the solicitor said. But we must establish custody. Frost identified the shelf mark and stated that the volume had remained among the workshop effects since his purchase. The solicitor prepared a certified copy. Frost signed a statement confirming ownership and condition. The original book remained in his locked cabinet under written agreement until a magistrate or court required it. Georgiana did not touch it again. Frost then sent for an elderly former journeyman named Samuel Wren, who lived above an engraver's shop nearby. Wren arrived with oil dark beneath his fingernails and suspicion in his eyes. He studied Mr. Bell's copied drawing of the Halverton housing. I fitted a mounting like this, he said. A long time ago. For whom? Georgiana asked. Wren frowned. A gentleman. Young. Well-dressed. I don't recall the name. Frost showed him the order book entry. Recognition did not come. Then Georgiana noticed a cramped note in the margin, written by another hand. Green coat. Black braid. Client insists no house crest. She turned the page toward Wren. His face changed. That coat, he said. Yes. I remember now. He complained the braid caught on the passage stone. Was that man Quentin Marwood? That is the name he gave. What did he tell you the device controlled? A dumbwaiter safety release. Said the Duke disliked servants carrying trays through family rooms. Wren tapped the drawing. I fitted the housing and delay wheel. I never saw the upper chain connected. He agreed to travel to Halverton and give a sworn statement. The solicitor arranged his fare through the inquiry account, not Everard's private purse. That evening Georgiana and Lady Sybil stayed with Sybil's widowed relation in Bloomsbury. Georgiana slept little. Without the crack moon watch at her waist, the room seemed unnaturally silent. At first light they travelled southeast to the parish where her father had held the living. The church stood among dark yews, its square tower rising above roofs softened by mist. The vicar and 2 churchwardens met them beneath the belfry. Georgiana explained the accusation without asking for sympathy. They climbed the narrow stair to the clock chamber. There, fitted around the barrel, remained the black fusee chain she had purchased 2 months before her marriage. A brass repair plate bore the installation date. The churchwarden's accounts recorded the exact length, the cost of materials, and Georgiana's unpaid labor. Vestry minutes showed that the repair had been approved before she ever entered Halverton as a bride. The chain was measured where it hung. It was not removed. The vicar, both churchwardens, Lady Sybil, and the solicitor signed a statement confirming its location and condition. "You could have charged us," one churchwarden said as Georgiana prepared to leave. "Your father would have." "My father charged men who could afford pride," she replied. "He did not charge a clock for needing repair." They returned to Halverton late that evening, before darkness fully covered the lawns. Everard waited in the central hall rather than on the front steps, where servants might turn their reunion into spectacle. The magistrate's seals remained intact. The BH key, supplier receipt, and Georgiana's watch were still in his custody. Quentin had been removed from every estate office and denied access to household accounts, keys, and servant instructions. Everard had not entered Lady Sybil's suite, the bridal chamber, or either passage. Georgiana stopped before him. "The order book names Quentin. Samuel Wren remembers fitting the housing under his direction. My chain remains in the parish clock, witnessed and recorded." Relief passed across Everard's face, but he did not reach for her. "You cleared your name. I proved where the chain went. The rest still requires proof." Of course. He had learned not to turn hope into a verdict. Georgiana crossed the remaining distance and put her arms around him. Surprise held him still for one heartbeat. Then he embraced her with measured strength, one hand between her shoulders and the other resting lightly at her arm. "You kept the room standing," she said against his coat. "You taught me what standing meant." When she stepped back, she kept one hand in his. Lady Sybil removed her gloves. "There is something else. After the first Duchess died, Quentin opposed every proposed marriage settlement. He spoke repeatedly of keeping the succession unchanged. A lawful child would end his place as heir presumptive." Everard's expression hardened. He called it protecting House Marwood. "He may have meant protecting his future control of it," Georgiana said. She looked toward the sealed east wing. "We can prove he ordered the mechanism. We still need proof that he and Octavia will use it." Everard followed her gaze. "What do you propose?" The empty watch chain touched Georgiana's gown. "We let them believe I intend to sleep beneath the canopy again." The plan was approved only after Georgiana required every danger to be named aloud. By late afternoon, the magistrate, the independent surveyor, Mr. Bell, Samuel Wren, Lady Sybil, Mrs. Vane, 2 parish constables, Everard, and Georgiana had gathered in the blue drawing room. The doors remained open. No servant entered without being noticed, and every instruction was written before it left the room. On the table lay a simplified drawing of the bridal chamber, adjoining sitting room, main passage, and secondary access behind Lady Sybil's sitting room. The original BH39 key remained locked in the magistrate's dispatch case. Georgiana's cracked moon watch and the fusee chain receipt were sealed beside it. The original Bexley and Hume order book remained in Caleb Frost's Clerkenwell workshop. Only the certified copy had returned to Halverton. "No one lies beneath the canopy," Georgiana said. "The surveyor will support the surviving frame only enough to allow the mechanism to move without reaching the adjoining room. A weighted bolster will rest beneath the coverlet where a sleeper would appear to be." The surveyor pointed to a white line marked across the drawing. "Your Grace will remain here, 12 feet inside the sitting room. The masonry between that point and the passage is sound." Everard looked at the line. "And if the frame shifts farther than expected?" "I cut the chain at the safety clamp." "Before it reaches her?" "Before it can cross the chamber threshold." Everard's jaw tightened. He did not argue with the man's judgment. Instead, he turned to Georgiana. "Are those conditions sufficient for you?" "Yes." "Then I accept them." The answer came with effort, but without disguise. The 2 constables would conceal themselves at opposite ends of the passage. One would watch the main panel behind the bridal bed. The other would wait near the secondary route behind Lady Sybil's press. Samuel Wren and the surveyor would remain near the housing, hidden by the turn in the masonry, where Wren could identify any use of the spindle without approaching the moving chain. Mr. Bell and the magistrate would wait behind the gallery screen with a clear view of the room and the coffer. Lady Sybil would remain in the adjoining dressing room. Everard would stand outside the sitting-room door. He was not to enter until Georgiana pulled the ordinary servant bell twice. "Even if you hear the canopy fall," Georgiana said. His eyes moved to hers. "Especially then." Silence held for a moment. "I understand." The false rumor would be simple. Her Grace intended to sleep beneath the repaired canopy. The original BH key and the Bexley and Hume order book would be locked in a coffer under the bridal bed before being sent away in the morning. In truth, the coffer would contain only the certified copy, weighted blank papers, and a decoy packet. The key, watch, and receipt would remain with the magistrate. Lady Octavia must hear it, Georgiana said. So must Quentin. Mrs. Vane folded her hands. A footman who enjoys being overheard can be placed near the morning room. He must not know the plan, the magistrate said. Only the version he is meant to repeat. And he won't be punished afterward for enjoying his work, Georgiana added. Lady Sybil's mouth twitched. That may be the most difficult condition of all. Mrs. Vane then produced a household memorandum. 2 weeks earlier, the ring carrying lesser domestic keys had vanished from the pantry for several minutes while Lady Octavia waited nearby for hot water. The ring was recovered before anyone reported a loss. No lock had been tested at the time. The coffer key was among them, Mrs. Vane said. A duplicate could have been made. Opportunity again, Georgiana said. Not proof. Tonight may supply the rest, the magistrate replied. There was one final matter. A representative of the first Duchess's family had arrived at an inn 3 miles from Halverton after receiving the magistrate's discreet request. He knew only that the inquiry had advanced and that his family might be asked to hear a formal account. He would not be brought to the Abbey until the chamber was secure. Everard looked at the magistrate. He should not be made to witness another fall. He won't, Georgiana said. He will be asked to witness the truth after the danger is finished. The meeting might have ended there, but Everard rose before anyone could leave. He faced the magistrate, household officers, constables, Samuel Wren, Lady Sybil, and Georgiana. There is a statement I must make before tonight. The room quieted. I ordered the bridal chamber dismantled before the inquiry was complete. I did so because I feared for my wife. Fear did not give me the right to destroy evidence or overrule her judgment. He did not look away from Georgiana. Her Grace stopped the work before any seal was broken. She required me to transfer authority over the room, and she was correct. Tonight's plan is hers. My title does not make it mine, and my concern does not give me the right to alter it. His voice lowered. I apologize without asking whether forgiveness follows. The words cost him. That was why they mattered. Georgiana did not answer before witnesses. She would not turn accountability into performance. The magistrate closed the meeting. The coffer was prepared under observation. The weighted bolster was carried into the room by the surveyor and one constable. The false rumor began its journey through the household. Before dinner, Lady Octavia asked Mrs. Vane whether the coffer lock was French. Quentin offered to place one of his own men in the east corridor for added protection. The magistrate refused him. By dusk, Georgiana waited in the map room while the estate plans lay closed upon the table. She had chosen the room because no clock, bed, or concealed panel stood within it. Everard knocked and entered only after she invited him. The rumor reached them, he said. Octavia asked about the lock. Quentin wanted a guard of his own. Then they believe enough of it. Everard stopped several feet away. I am trying not to ask you to abandon this. I know. That doesn't mean I don't want to. Georgiana touched the empty silver chain at her waist. Without her father's watch, she felt time rather than heard it. What do you fear most? That the mechanism will move in a way the surveyor did not predict. That the wall will fail. That someone will reach you before the constables reach them. He drew a breath. That you will call, and I'll be 1 second too late. And what will you do with that fear? Remain outside until you give the signal. The answer was quiet. It was also complete. Georgiana moved closer. That is what I needed to hear. Everard's gaze settled upon her face. There is something else you should hear before tonight. Not because danger excuses haste. Not because I expect an answer. He paused, as though choosing truth required more courage than rank ever had. I spent 10 years believing love made a man vulnerable to ruin. I have spent these days learning that control ruins what love is meant to protect. His voice softened. I love you, Georgiana. I love your judgment when it opposes mine. I love that you would rather stand beside an uncertain truth than kneel before a comforting lie. I am afraid of losing you, but I won't use that fear as permission to command you. Her breath caught, not from surprise, but from relief. He had offered love without ownership. I love you, she said. That is why I require the truth from you, even when it wounds us both. Something in him eased. He did not touch her. May I kiss you? Yes. Everard lifted one hand to her cheek and waited until she leaned into his palm. Then he bent and kissed her with restrained tenderness. There was no urgency intended to erase fear, no demand hidden inside affection. Georgiana placed one hand against his chest and closed the remaining distance herself. His other arm came around her only after she moved nearer. The kiss deepened for a single breath, warm and certain, then ended before either of them could mistake it for a farewell. Georgiana rested her forehead against his. You will wait outside. Until you call. Even if you hear the chain. His jaw tightened. Even then. A quarter-hour later, the east wing had gone dark except for shielded lamps. The weighted form lay beneath the coverlet. Georgiana stood behind the white line in the adjoining room. Everard took his place beyond the corridor door. The witnesses disappeared into their appointed shadows. At 11:45, a board creaked behind Lady Sybil's sitting room. The constable concealed near the secondary passage saw a dark figure enter. Lady Octavia wore a servant's cloak. Beneath it, she carried the missing square spindle and a small duplicate key. She moved through the recess and passed the spindle to Quentin at the housing. He inserted it into the empty socket. From the turn in the passage, Samuel Wren heard the square metal seat with a precise iron click. Quentin began to wind. Georgiana could not see them. She heard only the first low strain of chain inside the wall. At 11:46, the hidden mechanism began to tighten. At 11:47, the counterweight released. The black chain snapped taut inside the wall, the supported tester frame lurched, and the carved oak canopy dropped onto the weighted bolster beneath the coverlet. The mattress gave under the impact. Dust burst through the bridal chamber and rolled toward the open connecting doorway. Georgiana remained behind the white line in the adjoining sitting room, exactly where the surveyor had placed her. She did not move. She did not call Everard. Not yet. Beyond the corridor door, he heard the crash that had governed 10 years of his life. His hand closed around the doorframe, but he kept his promise and stayed outside. Inside the passage, iron scraped against iron. Quentin Marwood stood at the housing with the missing spindle still seated in its square socket. Lady Octavia, wrapped in a servant's dark cloak, crossed through the secondary access toward the bed. The duplicate key glinted between her fingers. She knelt beside the coffer and pushed the key into its lock. The key turned. From the concealed recess, Mrs. Vane made the smallest sound of recognition. Octavia opened the lid and seized the upper packet. Beneath it lay only certified copies and weighted blank papers. These aren't the originals, she whispered. Quentin left one hand on the spindle. Search beneath them. There's nothing here. Then she moved the evidence. You said the key and order book would be under the bed. I repeated what the footman heard. Octavia rose, anger breaking through her careful composure. I risked the passage for waste paper. The magistrate stepped from behind the gallery screen. "You risked rather more than that, Lady Octavia." The constables closed both exits at once. One appeared behind Quentin at the main passage. The other blocked Octavia's return through the service recess. Mr. Bell came into view with his memorandum open and pencil ready. Octavia dropped the packet. The duplicate key struck the floor beside her shoe. Quentin turned sharply toward the housing and gripped the inserted spindle with both hands. "I was stopping it," he said. He began to reverse the mechanism. The surveyor pulled the safety clamp into place before the chain could shift again. "Step away from the winch," the magistrate ordered. "You misunderstand," Quentin said. "I came because I suspected Lady Octavia intended harm." Samuel Wren stepped out from the turn in the passage. "You wound the release clockwise, then tried to raise the weight after it fell." Quentin stared at him. Wren pointed to the housing. "I fitted that wheel under your instruction in 1839. I know which direction lifts and which direction releases. Your memory has been purchased. My fare was paid through the inquiry account, and my statement was given before tonight." The magistrate looked toward Georgiana. The room was secure, but the surveyor had not yet inspected the fallen frame. Georgiana kept her hands at her sides. Everard remained outside. The surveyor crossed the chamber, checked the supports, tested the safety clamp, and examined the threshold. "The frame is secure," he said. Georgiana reached for the ordinary servant bell and pulled twice. Only then did Everard enter. He stopped at the sitting-room door when he saw her standing unharmed. Relief crossed his face with such force that he had to close his eyes for a breath. He did not come to her until the magistrate nodded. "May I?" he asked. Georgiana held out her hand. Everard took it and stood beside her, not before her. He did not hide her from the witnesses or speak in her place. The magistrate directed Mr. Bell to record the mechanism exactly as found. Quentin remained under constable guard while the square spindle stayed fitted in the housing. The duplicate coffer key was lifted from the carpet with a cloth, labeled, and sealed. The decoy packet and blank papers were recorded where Octavia had dropped them. Only after Mr. Bell completed his sketch did the magistrate remove the spindle from the housing, wrap it, and place it inside a sealed evidence packet. He then opened his dispatch case and displayed the original BH39 key without surrendering it. The key fitted the spindle socket exactly. "One maker's key," he said. "One recovered spindle. One witnessed use." Quentin's face remained controlled. "A fit proves machinery, not intent." "Intent may be considered with conduct," the magistrate replied. "You were found operating the housing after the canopy fell. To prevent further movement. After winding it before the fall," Samuel Wren said. "Octavia pulled off the servant's cloak. He told me the coffer contained evidence that would ruin both our families." "You entered through a hidden passage carrying a duplicate key," Georgiana said. "No family duty required that." Octavia turned upon her. "You built this trap?" "Yes," Georgiana said. "Because someone had already built the room." Quentin spoke quickly. "Lady Octavia took the spindle. She knew the secondary route. She may have operated the device alone before I arrived." The accusation struck Octavia harder than the arrest. She looked at him as though she had finally understood the shape of his loyalty. "You told me where the spindle was hidden." "I told you nothing. You told me to take it before the magistrate could dismantle the housing. There is no proof of that." The magistrate raised one hand. "Choose your next words carefully." Quentin fell silent. The evidence was then placed before them in order. The certified copy of the Bexley and Hume ledger bore Quentin's signature and instruction to install the delayed release while Everard was absent. Abel Croft's statement placed Quentin at the concealed wall before the first Duchess died and again 2 years earlier. Samuel Wren identified the housing and Quentin as the client. The parish statements proved Georgiana's purchase chain still hung in her father's former church clock. The watch had been stolen through the route Octavia had privately accessed. Tonight, Quentin had been found at the winch and Octavia at the coffer with a duplicate key. "This proves your presence now," the magistrate said. "The earlier murder will be established through the full inquiry and the assizes." Quentin looked toward Octavia. "You staged your own injury. No one compelled you." Octavia's face changed. "You showed me which tooth to engage." Quentin's composure broke by a fraction. "Be silent. You said one tooth would bruise the shoulder without bringing down the whole frame. You said the same housing had worked once before." The passage seemed to lose all air. Everard's hand tightened around Georgiana's, then eased at once, as though he refused to make even grief into restraint. Quentin looked toward the Duke. "You would have married again. A lawful child would have ended the succession. So that was your protection of House Marwood," Everard said. His voice held no heat. "Keeping it empty enough for you to inherit." Quentin said nothing. The magistrate ordered both prisoners taken into custody for formal examination. Everard did not strike his cousin. Georgiana did not ask him to. When Quentin and Octavia were led away, Everard looked into the bridal chamber. His gaze settled upon the fallen canopy, then upon the old scar beneath his coat. "She heard the bell," he said. He meant the first Duchess. Georgiana did not offer him absolution. She stayed beside him while the truth entered the place where memory had failed. Dawn had begun to pale the eastern windows by the time the room was sealed again. Later that morning, after the passage was secured and every object recorded, the representative of the first Duchess's family was brought from the nearby inn. Household heads, selected county witnesses, and the magistrate gathered on the east terrace. Everard spoke first. "For 10 years, I accepted silence because I feared what an inquiry might reveal about me. That silence protected the people who built the lie. It harmed the memory of my first wife and nearly killed my second." He did not ask forgiveness. Then he stepped back. Georgiana faced the witnesses. There was no curse. There was a hidden passage, a delayed release, a drawn bolt, and a falling canopy. The first Duchess died because someone built a murder into the walls, and powerful people found silence easier than truth. She named the evidence without repeating the full mechanism. She named Quentin's order, Octavia's staged fall, the stolen watch, the parish chain, and the witnessed vigil. The magistrate confirmed that both prisoners would answer before the law. The representative of the first Duchess's family requested a formal correction of every county notice that had ever implied Everard killed her. Everard bowed his head. "It will be done." Then he addressed the gathering once more. "The record will also name her grace correctly. She preserved the room when I would have destroyed it. She traced the maker. She proved the chain. She designed the vigil. I stood where she instructed me to stand." Morning spread across the Kent fields. Georgiana looked toward the east wing, where the broken chamber waited behind sealed doors. "Now we decide what morning means there." Everard crossed out the word died and wrote murdered in its place. He sat at a desk in the blue drawing room before the sun had cleared the eastern trees, not in the private study where House Marwood had hidden so many decisions behind closed doors. Georgiana sat across from him with Mr. Bell's certified account at her side. "They deserve the word we denied them," he said. "Yes." He did not ask Georgiana to soften the letter. He did not ask the first Duchess's family to forgive him. He stated that a concealed mechanism had been commissioned by Quentin Marwood in 1839, that Lady Octavia Kersey had helped preserve and use it, and that his own silence had allowed suspicion to settle upon the innocent. He offered every witness statement, every copied plan, and every lawful inspection the family required. Their reply came 4 days later. They requested no private meeting and no reconciliation. They asked for a corrected public record, access to the chamber after the magistrate released it, and written acknowledgement that their daughter had not died through weakness, hysteria, or her husband's violence. Everard granted each request without condition. The county notice that followed named the first Duchess as the victim of a deliberate crime. It credited Georgiana with preserving the evidence, locating the maker's records, proving the parish chain remained in place, and designing the witnessed vigil. Everard's own statement admitted the demolition order and the years in which fear had made him accept silence. Innocent servants kept their positions. Those shown to have knowingly concealed access to the passage were referred to the magistrate, whatever their station. No pension, tenancy, or wage was touched merely because a servant had once obeyed a superior without understanding the purpose. Halverton would not purchase a cleaner reputation by creating new victims. 6 months passed before the case reached Maidstone Assizes in May of 1852. By then the original Bexley and Hume order book had been produced under subpoena from Caleb Frost's Clerkenwell workshop. Samuel Wren identified Quentin as the client who had ordered the delayed release. Abel Croft repeated his account of the green coat with black braid, the first hidden installation, and the later reopening of the wall. The magistrate produced the BH39 key, Georgiana's sealed watch, the supplier's receipt, the duplicate coffer key, and the spindle taken from the housing after Quentin had operated it before witnesses. The parish churchwardens testified that Georgiana's fusee chain had remained inside their clock from the date of installation. The constables described Octavia entering the secondary passage with the missing spindle beneath her cloak. Mr. Bell described Quentin winding the mechanism, the canopy falling upon the weighted bolster, and Octavia opening the decoy coffer. Quentin's defense attempted to make Georgiana's knowledge seem sinister. It failed under the weight of custody records, dates, signatures, and the simple fact that the chain she had purchased had never entered Halverton. Octavia's counsel argued fear and coercion. Her staged injury, her possession of the duplicate key, her theft and planting of the crack moon watch, and her knowledge of the released tooth proved sustained participation rather than one frightened mistake. Quentin was convicted of murdering the first Duchess and attempting to murder Georgiana. The judge sentenced him to death. Lady Octavia was convicted of conspiracy and of acting as an accessory in the attempted murder. She was sentenced to transportation for 14 years. Her courtesy title remained a fact of birth, but it no longer opened the doors she had once controlled through whispers. The Kersey family withdrew its support, and society closed around her before the prison carriage left Maidstone. Georgiana felt no joy when the sentences were pronounced. She felt the stern quiet of a debt finally named. Everard bowed his head when the first Duchess's family rose to leave. They did not offer forgiveness. He did not pursue them. "Correction isn't absolution," he said later. "No," Georgiana replied. "But it's the beginning of honesty." Her watch remained evidence until the proceedings ended. When the magistrate finally returned it, the silver case was dull from handling, the clasp still bent, and the movement unsteady. Georgiana carried it to a Clerkenwell repairer recommended by Caleb Frost. The balance spring was restored, the clasp straightened, and the works cleaned. She refused an offer to replace the cracked enamel moon. "The crack belongs to its history," she said. "It doesn't prevent the watch from keeping time." At Halverton, the hidden passage was opened for formal inspection by the first Duchess's family and the county authorities. Afterward, the mechanism was removed, catalogued, and retained with the court evidence. An iron grille was fitted across the passage entrance so the route could never again disappear behind carved wood. The fallen canopy was not rebuilt. A plain oak bed replaced it, low and unadorned, with nothing above it but the plastered ceiling. Everard's sleep did not mend in a single season. Some nights he woke before 11:47 with his heart racing and the old scar burning beneath his nightshirt. A physician helped him understand the bodily memory of injury. A clergyman who did not confuse suffering with divine punishment met him privately each week. Georgiana did not become his cure. When he woke, he told her where he was rather than pretending calm. Sometimes she stayed and offered her hand. Sometimes she asked whether he needed solitude. Sometimes she chose solitude herself. He learned that love survived a closed door when the person behind it had chosen to close it. He also began bringing estate questions to her before decisions were made. Tenant repairs, school accounts, drainage contracts, and household appointments crossed the same table between them. He did not praise her judgment only when it agreed with his. On a mild morning near the end of May, they entered the restored bridal chamber together for the first time since the trial. The windows stood open to the Kent air. The iron grille remained visible beyond the opened wall panel, an honest barrier where secrecy had once lived. Georgiana placed her repaired watch upon the bare oak sill. Its cracked moon shone beneath the new sunlight. Everard looked at the plain bed, then at her. "Do you wish to sleep here tonight?" "Do you?" she asked. He considered the question rather than borrowing her courage. "I'd like to try. I might fail. Then we'll leave the room and try another morning. And if you wish to stay when I can't, then I'll stay because I choose it, not because your fear commands me." His expression softened. "I love you, not because you saved my name, but because you refused to let me hide inside it." Georgiana stepped closer. "I love you because you've learned that loving me doesn't mean deciding for me." She placed one hand against his chest and kissed him before he could ask. Surprise warmed into tenderness. His arms came around her only after she leaned nearer, and when the kiss ended, he rested his forehead against hers. That afternoon they returned to the room without witnesses, ceremony, or challenge. Georgiana lay beside him on the plain bed while sunlight moved slowly across the floor. Everard's breathing remained uneven for a time. Then he asked, "May I hold you?" "Yes." She settled her head upon his chest, where the old scar and the living heartbeat existed together. His hand closed gently around hers. He slept before she did. Georgiana listened until his breathing deepened, then closed her eyes by choice. Beside them, the little silver watch kept time beneath its cracked moon, while morning entered the room without asking anyone to be afraid.